I emailed so many people in Southern California, principals of different orchestras, saying, can I play for you sometime and get put on a sub list potentially, or just play for you? And almost everyone was so receptive and either said, I'll consider putting you on, or I'll put you on, we'll call you sometime. And it took a few years. But I've talked to so many musicians who I guess have never really thought of doing that. And I highly recommend it, because that was one of the greatest ways to build my resume, but also just get experience.
We are chatting today with Associate Principal Bass of the San Francisco Symphony, Daniel Smith. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and I've had such a great time getting to know Daniel here in San Francisco. He just came to the orchestra from the San Diego Symphony. Before that, he was in the Santa Barbara Symphony and freelancing in Southern California. We dig into his career so far. He's done so much already, and growing up in Southern California, what that was like. Going to Rice, where he was splitting his time between pre-med studies and music, that decision to go into music and focus on that, his time in Bali, surfing, so many great takeaways. I know you're going to love this conversation. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, D'Addario Strings, Upton Bass, Robertson & Sons, and the English Double Bass Book. More on them later, but let's dive into this conversation with San Francisco Symphony Associate Principal Bass, Daniel Smith. When did you start playing music?
So my mom taught me and my brother and sister piano lessons. Started when I was 3, and then I moved to violin in 4th and 5th grade. And then going into 6th grade, I went to a summer 1-week music camp, and to get better at playing violin and get ready for middle school. And one of the days they had a bass, which I had never seen before, and they wanted people to try it. And I remember seeing very small people trying to go up and falling over, and they just wouldn't even let them play. They just said, okay, thanks a lot. Keep playing violin. And then I played Mary Had a Little Lamb, or something that only 2 fingers you have to put down on the bass. And they applauded, and they're, wow, that was great. You're a total natural bass player. You should totally play bass. And I just react very well to affirmation. And so I quit violin, but really they had no bass players and just really needed bass players in their orchestra. So I probably sucked, and they said, okay, come on, we need you. So I started bass in 6th grade.
6th grade.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they only had a German bow at the middle school, no French bow. So I didn't even know the difference at the time. And I just started, I had to teach myself the first year. And then the second year, my parents saw I was pretty excited about it. So they started me on private lessons.
Who was that teacher? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was Christine Allen. She is in Orange County. And I studied with her for 2 years. And then she asked for me to leave. She said, I think we've covered as much as I'm able to cover now. And so she recommended me over to Doug Basie, who's assistant principal in Pacific Symphony in Orange County.
So your mom started you on piano.
Yeah.
So musical mom, musical dad too?
Yeah, musically inclined, I guess.
Inclined. Okay.
And an appreciator. He sang, both my parents sang through college. But didn't have plans to go professionally with it. But yeah, my mom knew that she made all of us kids do an instrument and a sport through elementary school, and then we can decide later which one we wanted to choose. And so I still stuck with both. My brother and sister, all of us stuck playing a musical instrument and a sport through high school, because we were both intrigued into both of them, I guess.
What was your sport?
It was soccer and baseball growing up, like from t-ball and punting. Soccer. Actually, I never got out of punting soccer balls.
Really?
I remember my last year of it, we had to do a goal kick, and he just tapped me on the shoulder and saw that I punted, and he said, son, I don't think this is for you. So that was done. And then baseball, I did that for 8 years and loved it. But I was first baseman, so I was in every play. And then the year I went to junior or pony league, the coach kicked me to outfield because his son had to play first base.
Oh.
And I just hated it. So now I hate baseball.
Oh, no.
I know, it's sad. I'll get into it because I got to go here. And Yeah, sports ball, yay.
Brother and sister?
And
Then what did they play?
My brother did football and then track and field.
Okay.
In high school, and then my sister did soccer and track and field.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Oh, and then I went into volleyball for high school, and that was awesome and still is awesome. When I go home, play beach volleyball all the time. And
you ever jam your fingers or any sort of thing odd for? I mean, it's probably not as bad as basketball, but
Right. No, I did not. In baseball, I did. I jammed fingers and had some baseballs hit my fingers and nails would fall.
Oh.
Yeah, it was brutal. I think I have PTSD. Maybe that's why I just don't care about baseball now.
So Doug Basie, you were studying with. At what age was that? When did that happen?
That was going into high school, I think. So what would that be? 14, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I studied with him through high school. And then my last 2 years of high school, while still taking with Doug, I started seeing Dennis Tremblay once a month or so. And
now you ended up at Rice, but not in the way that many people might expect, right? Kind of like a different entry point into Rice. And the we ended up. What was your other major besides music again? Remind me.
Well, I was pre-med, but it's not. It's just a course or a route of study to take. You don't get any paper saying "Congrats, you are pre-med." It's just you have to suffer through these classes, and you get no credit for it.
So, were you thinking, I want to be a doctor? Were you thinking I want to be a bass player? What was that thought process as you were getting ready to apply and then ultimately go to Rice?
So my mom, who taught me piano lessons, was also a nurse practitioner, and so she also got me into watching, ER movies or reading out of a science or med school textbook and all the stuff when I'm young. And so I was both equally excited about music as I was for medicine. And what I've learned over time, I didn't realize it at the time, but really I just wanted to have a job that paid a lot of money, which is what I thought being a doctor would be, so that I could have a nice house on the beach in Orange County still and just live a surfer life. Just total spoiled kid, and that was how my thinking was. And so, but I mean, at the time when I was applying for schools, I really was excited about potentially becoming a doctor, and I was very interested in that. And my grades were good. I was a nerdy overachiever and had great nerdy overachieving friends as well, so we always kept each other our bar high for studying and learning. But they weren't good enough grades if I did not have music to rely on that to get me into top schools. So honestly, I saw getting into Rice was through music and through the music school was a gift, but it was also my key into getting to a top school that would help me get into a good med school. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of my thinking at the time. Yeah.
What was that experience like? And I remember vividly, like my first couple years at Northwestern in my dorm, some people were double majoring in music and pre-med, and I did not, or not pre-med, but bio or whatever. They were on the pre-med track, and I did not see a lot of them. They were busy. What was that experience like for you doing both of those at Rice?
Very stressful. Not enjoyable. But in a weird, sadistic way, maybe, I enjoyed both of them because when I felt burnout in one, I could completely leave that part of the campus, that studying, those people, and go to a completely other place to work on something else. So if I felt burnout with my music and practicing and I felt like I hit a wall, then, oh, that's fine. I can completely change gears and go study organic chem now. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, that was refreshing to have two opposites of study. So it kind of seemed like one part of my brain rest while I was working something else, and then back and forth.
Maybe when you started that freshman year, were you thinking, I want to be a doctor? I want to be a bass player, but like 75% I want to be a doctor, 25% I want to be a bass player? Or would it be different on a daily basis? And like, how did that change during those years you were at Rice?
Yeah, I'm not I think I always struggled with it, just what I was going to do. And it took to the very end to decide what I was going to do. I mean, maybe also I was so busy that I was avoiding it.
Yeah, sure.
And just, I have this other stuff to work on, knowing very well I'm going to have to decide this at some point. So why not start thinking about it? But also I had a very competitive spirit, I think. And being at that school, people are so brilliant and it's so easy to them. A lot of the people that go to Rice, it seems like they don't have to study. It just happens. And then there's people like me that have to study way more than everyone else. So I was always trying to match someone else, I felt like. And then same with music too. At the Shepherd School, I mean, the scariest class there was rep class, because every week you would have to come in or every other week we would switch off to rep class. You work on one symphony that is common to an audition list and go through all these different excerpts that Paul Ellison would choose. And then you have 2 weeks to get ready and then give a mock audition in front of all of your colleagues, which are the scariest people to play for. You'd rather play for 1,000 people you don't know than, 10 bass players at Rice. And so that was always intense, but it definitely helped the bar to be raised. And
For sure. And it's funny because they are both very competitive. My wife did harp and then went back and did pre-med, and
right.
They're competitive, but they're kind of competitive in a different way, it seems to me. Like the music, you had that experience you're just describing where you're getting up and playing in front of those 10 colleagues and it's in the moment, performing in the moment. And it seems to be like the academic pressure of those pre-med classes is real. It's super real, but it's very different because it's kind of, it's maybe coming through in terms of tests and other things like that. But I remember my wife talking to me about, everybody's grade posted on that board. You can see exactly how you match up with everybody else in organic chemistry or whatever other, business you're going through. I think it's interesting, those two different types of competition, and that you were sort of into competition in general, or through both of those mediums.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I am definitely a firm believer that to get better in anything, you can't be on your own and just competing against yourself. I mean, you do, and that's what daily practicing is and setting goals, but there's a completely different level that can be reached when you are in direct competition or friendly competition, whatever, working with other people, and especially who are way better than you. So when I'm studying pre-med, I'm with these brilliant people who got into Rice off of their grades because they're just genius. And I got in because I also had help with the music school. And then in the music school, you're with grad students, and I mean, you're a freshman and you are bottom of the totem pole there. And in theory, the most inexperienced person there. So you're trying to get as good as these people. And then same when I was doing pre-med, you're trying to reach their level and have to work so hard for it. But yeah, it totally makes you reach these goals that you wouldn't even know you'd be able to achieve if you were alone in it, or just practicing on your own, or just studying alone and not sharing it and having this experience with others.
Yeah. And there's a progression in that pre-med path, just like there is in music, just like you're describing. You think you're not going to get to this point. There's all this that you don't know, and then all of a sudden you do.
Right.
So here you are. You're in the San Francisco Symphony now. Obviously, you made a decision at some point.
Yeah, that's right.
Medicine or double bass. Do you remember? Was there a specific moment when you finally figured out bass?
Yeah, totally. I mean, with all this said, too, I've always loved playing bass, and I mean, it's not that in any way I settled or anything, but just totally feel like I'm in a dream right now, being up here and be my third year of Rice. I had a mentor, kind of a life coach while I was at Rice, and he was a missionary in Bali for a year at some point in his life and did a lot of mission work and outreach stuff. And my summer before I was going to graduate, which in med school terms is an important summer because you better show you're interested in what you're in going to med school, do some research or do something that's focused on that or whatever. And so I had planned this trip to Ecuador, go to Ecuador for a month with a group from Rice to do medical outreach. And then my life coach was leading a trip to Bali that year to show a group of people kind of the work that he did over there and go to these orphanages. And he just really encouraged me, knowing a lot of struggles I had personally in my life and things I was dealing with and so much stress too. He encouraged me to consider going to Bali, and we connect really well because we both surf and are just really excited about surfing and that culture and doing traveling. So it was going to be a surf trip, and I'm thinking, okay, I definitely can't go to Bali and then go try to apply to med school. And they're thinking, why did you use this last summer to go on a surf trip? Even though it was more as an outreach and stuff, but I mean, that's what they would see it as. Right. So I knew it was making the decision. Finally, I hit that crossroads where I had to decide music and medicine. And honestly, I mean, it just makes sense to me, I guess. I prayed about it for what I'm supposed to do, just getting to a point of feeling completely desperate and not knowing what to do. And I knew if I went to med school, I would have to just give up bass, and realizing that's impossible. I can't just drop it, and I'm way too in love with it, and it's a part of my existence. I can't give this up. And that's when I finally realized, I think, even though I was excited about learning and science and medicine, that really my goal was this idea of having a secure income to live on the beach in Orange County. And that was my priority. And I realized how selfish that was. And that really is, I mean, doctors say, don't go through all this trouble for the money. And I would deny it. And I think it was for money, which is kind of funny because doctors have a lot of debt too, and you go through a lot they make a lot too, but
it's a long process though for both of those career paths that you were looking at.
Totally.
Know? And you might think that there's more certainty on the medical path, but there are these like massive barriers set up along the way, just like you were talking about, like medical school and then all the others, right, beyond that. So you went to Bali.
So I went to Bali, and well, yeah, and out of learning that, having that realization of what my priority was for med school, thinking about music, I had total peace. This feeling, when I thought about medicine, was praying about it, I just felt stress and would remember all the stress and anxiety, and music just felt totally peaceful. And so that was good enough answer for me. And so I canceled my Ecuador trip, went to Bali, and it was incredible. And then my senior year of Rice was basically my first year at Rice just doing music. I was done with all the pre-med stuff, and which was awesome. I finally had way more fun being at Rice and was able to connect with people and just work harder towards catching up on solo rep and just being able to focus on that. And so once I graduated, and everyone at the school too knew all this that I was going through, and some were not as excited about my curiosity in medicine and thinking it could have been a waste of a spot, and I also just didn't feel like I connected with everyone so well at the music school. And then same in pre-med, I was kind of stuck in limbo, it felt like. And then my last year, I finally connected with people more at the music school and really enjoyed myself. And so I got a lot of recommendations. Okay, great, you're committed to music. We highly recommend you now apply to grad schools or just start taking auditions and prep for this next year. You don't want to take a year off after all of this, and you could lose a lot of the stuff you've learned and just that competition, important it is. And I was so burnt out from school and everything. And that decision for me realizing I wasn't going to go into medicine was totally life-changing, or a huge moment for me, because my whole life I thought I was going to do it. It wasn't a small decision for me, and so I needed a break. And I had such an incredible experience in Bali that after I graduated, I went to Music Academy of the West that summer, which was awesome. And then right after that, I went to Bali for 4 months, and I just said, I'm out, see you. And I got to go experience the stuff that I experienced there. And so I got connected with an orphanage over there called Bali Life. Oh yeah, and I worked something out with Lemur Music and got one of the collapsible basses and brought a bass to Bali, because I thought, this will be stupid if I take 4 months off from bass. I kind of wish I just left the bass, because when I got there's no air conditioning in any. I stayed very on the low end of things in terms of money. I stayed at surf hostels and places that weren't expensive and also had no air conditioning. Yeah. And so I'm trying to play and just tuning, and I'm already sweating. Yeah. And it would be a 5-minute practice session and just get over it. And then by the end of it too, I remember the wood had warped or soaked in enough humidity that you're supposed to take out everything, including the end pin, and I couldn't even pull it out of the bottom of the bass. And we made it work, and it all worked out. But yeah, by the end of those 4 months, I felt like I'd gained everything that I could have asked for and had a great just break from de-stressing. And I started right about the end of it really missing bass. So it really felt like a close and end of a chapter of exploring something else and giving my, soul and my mind rest from all these things that just the stress of school. But by the end, it just was a perfect amount of time. I was a week from going home and I started really missing bass. But also at that time, Santa Barbara Symphony announced their principal bass audition. So it was the perfect timing for me because I was really excited and missing bass. Yeah. And it set a goal of something to work towards. And it was 6 weeks after I was to get back from this trip. And actually, that's the only audition I've taken that I had so much fun at. Just didn't have stress.
Yeah.
Because I just was in such a great place after my trip to Bali and felt so refreshed in my mind and my spirit and body, everything. And I always remembered that moment of deciding between music and medicine and just having this undeniable sense of peace over music. And so through that preparation for the audition, I felt like it doesn't matter what happens with this. It'll either work or it doesn't work. And I just keep going. And I also think because it was my first audition, I had no idea what to expect. So I expected the best, or just of say, oh, it's great. It's going to be, everyone's happy there, right? And it's going to be a great experience. And it's in Santa Barbara, and who can be mad when you're up there? And I remember getting in the parking lot and just smiling, and I saw some friends I hadn't seen in a long time and running up to them, and they were just,
audition mode.
Total audition mode. Like, back off, man. Let's hang out after. But yeah, and then thankfully then I won that audition, and that gave me all the confidence I needed, knowing that, oh wow, I can actually do this, I guess. And I know I would not have been able, or I believe I would not have been able to achieve that if I, out of Rice, went into grad school or went into some program right back into music. Because I know I'm so fortunate but really spoiled that I grew up in Orange County with parents who paid for all my lessons and drove me to LA every week to go to youth orchestra and just invested so much into me. But living in Orange County, I'm very biased towards it, and I just think it's the greatest place ever. Surf and sun, and
it's pretty nice.
It's pretty nice, yeah. But I don't know. I realized like how spoiled I was, and I just know I needed the time after Rice, and being in Houston, it was a very different environment, and I had to mature a lot. And just also being away from home is a huge process too. Mm-hmm. Or going to school away from home, and I can't just drive home for the weekend because I'm homesick. You just have to suck it up, and you're there. And then with all that stress, and I couldn't do the outdoor activities I loved. It was a lot of change that I don't think I was ready for, but stuck through it through the 4 years. And I'm so thankful for doing it instead of going to somewhere that was maybe closer to home, or where I didn't take the risk of leaving.
This episode is brought to you by the English Double Bass Book, a new book by George and Tom Martin, along with Martin Lawrence, which examines the great English double bass makers of the 18th and 19th century, illustrating in fine detail the incredible work they produced. It also explores the fascinating story of how the double bass came to England, its development guided by the great virtuoso Domenico Dragonetti, and the rise and fall of the English double bass makers. To pre-order your limited edition copy, visit www.theenglishdoublebass.com. This episode is brought to you by D'Addario Strings. Check out their Zyx strings, which are synthetic core strings that produce an extremely warm, rich sound. Get the sound and feel of gut strings with more evenness, projection, and stability than real gut. Thanks for sponsoring the podcast, D'Addario. Surfing. When did you get into surfing?
I actually did not get into surfing until maybe the month before I left for Rice.
Really?
My freshman year. So I grew up body surfing and bodyboarding, but my family is not into water activities, really, so I didn't have that influence. And my closest friends also did not surf. But I did body surfing, bodyboarding. And then when I knew I was going to Rice, for some reason that I thought I had to, I think my thought was, if I am going to tell people and they know I'm from California, then I'd be so lame to say, oh, I'm from the beach. Oh, no, I don't surf. I don't do that. And so I learned on my 18th birthday the summer before. And then, surf one or two times. And people would say, oh, I'm from California. Oh, do you surf? And I played it off. Oh, yeah, I totally surf. But really, I just sucked and just learned. But I was so hooked. Now I always need to be close to a surf spot or something accessible.
Well, and you surf here, down in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And you were surfing down in San Diego, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What was it that hooked you about surfing those first couple of times? What do you remember what it was that drew you in?
I guess it was just the feeling of, I was with all my closest friends. I think everyone wanted to learn how to surf, and the water was warm. It's a sunny day. Everyone's just happy already. The general mood is quite up. But the catching a wave and feeling like you accomplished that, and then you're in nature's rawest form. Essentially, you're completely at the will of whatever the ocean is going to do or what nature's going to do. Granted, it was a 1 to 2 foot high wave of a day, so it wasn't like you're going to get attacked by a tsunami. But there's something about that where all of your thoughts and stress and anxiety, everything just goes away. And when you're riding a wave, you're only concerned about that. And there's something so pure and uplifting about being in nature. Same with being on an awesome hike and it's just silent, or you see animals, wildlife, or something that completely captivates you. And it gives a different perspective, I feel like, to life. And then I feel like it's my greatest de-stressor is being out in the water and, in a sense, I don't want to say escaping things, but it seems like you can set, all these other priorities you have aside and just take a deep breath and be away from everything and technology and all that.
Well, in a life when we're trying to control everything so intensely, whether it's in the practice room practicing or whatever, other things we're doing in our life, like going in, like you said, I like that phrase, nature in its rawest form, right? Really surrendering to something that you have no control over. You definitely don't have control over those waves. Yeah. I get it.
It's a little scarier up here, too, in San Francisco.
Ocean Beach,
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's awesome, though. And it's definitely forcing me to rise to a new level of surfing. It's not as nice and easy of a wave and not nearly as warm of a wave as in San Diego or Southern California. So, but what's cool that comes with that is this community of surfers who are not total novices, but they're also all looking out for each other. It seems like it's not like everyone's, oh, hey, take my wave or whatever. Everyone kind of, hopefully you know what you're doing so we don't have to have this conversation. Yeah. But we're in Southern California, it seems like everyone surfs, and then you get really aggressive people who want to protect their spot, and then you get in a lot of spots a very unfriendly environment. In a lot of areas, you definitely have a great demeanor from general surfer, but you get a lot of this ego and anti-surf culture, I feel like, experience when it's so impacted. And so up here, that's been a really cool experience, I guess, in getting to know others as well.
Now, going back to those Rice years for a minute, you got connected with life coach. With them, and that was something that I worked with a life coach for a bit when I was moving out here because I was trying to figure out what the heck I was doing with my life. Right. I'd been doing this other career, and I was coming out here, and I had these side businesses I'd started up, and I found it just tremendously helpful. How did you get connected with your life coach, and what did that do for you?
So I give him the title of life coach. It's not that he was a pastor at that time, but we met at an event at Rice, some student event, and his wife worked in administration at Rice, so he would come to these events, and he told me that I was sitting a few rows in front of him in this stadium seating lecture hall, whatever, and his wife pointed out to me, saying, this was a couple months after getting there, freshman year, after summer. I had spent the whole summer at the beach, so I was just brown, sunburnt, super blonde hair, stick out with, and also, just as a side note, in Houston, I don't understand how anyone wears full jacket, suit, and many layers of clothing. I always wore board shorts and a tank top and would skate to school. It's so hot, and you would have to feel like you need to take a shower. Yep. You just step outside for a couple minutes. So I went to this event and definitely looked like I stepped off of the beach. And this guy's wife pointed me out and said, "Hey, that guy looks like he surfs. You should go talk to him." And then soon realized, this guy lived in Bali for a year and lived in California for some time too, and just felt out of place living in Houston. So we connected right away on surfing and beach culture. And so it was just nice. Initially, we were just good friends. He's about 10, 15 years older than me. But we were good friends because we've both felt out of place and that we found a common bond, and we're just able to connect on that level right away. And then he started sharing these experiences with me that he was a part of, especially in Bali, and working with these kids who live in poverty and at these orphanages, and just how it completely changes life. And he actually went through a divorce right before that and went to Bali, and he was in a very dark place, he said, and by going through that, it completely changed his life, and he was just a whole other person because of it. And I think that's why he led that trip a few years later and invited me to go on it, seeing that where my priorities were and just things I was struggling with in my own life, and also just handling stress. He thought it was the best thing for me to do that instead of going down this other route. So I guess he had the foresight of seeing I probably could not handle the stress of med school. And that's all assuming that I would have even gotten in, like, oh, it's easy, which, I have good friends I was on track with for med school. And just this last year, one of them just got into med school. And it's been 4 or 5 years since. It's not an easy path. It's not easy at all. No way. A lot of parallels between the music and the med program, path. So I've never been to Bali. I would love to go. And I find Indonesia just fascinating in general. I was just chatting with a viola colleague who started an orchestra, not in Bali, but recently in Indonesia, and was just telling me all these facts and about stuff I'd never even realized. I mean, I think it's like the fourth largest country in the world or something, somewhere up there. Yeah. And what was that place like? What's Bali like? What was that experience like working in an orphanage? I mean, wow, what a phenomenal experience. What was that like? Bali is a ridiculous, insane, but also beautiful place. It is, it's the island, or it's one of the many islands in Indonesia right above Australia. Cheap place to go. So Indonesia is the largest Muslim country, I believe, and Bali is all Hindu, or almost all Hindu. Okay. They have all other faiths too, but primarily Hindu. And so they are much more lax on stuff like alcohol and just different social things you can do. So a lot of Australians go there to have a really cheap, fun, ridiculous, crazy vacation. Yeah. So you have a lot of impacted areas with all these tourists. And what's sad, though, about it is this part isn't sad. Tourism is I think the most lucrative business for Bali. And so everyone works in a hotel or something that caters to tourists coming in. But the sad part about it is just how used they get or how cheap they're working for stuff. And there's an area in Bali called Kuta, which is probably the most popular or party area if you are in the party clubbing scene. And it's right on the beach. And so a lot of people go there to just, have a ridiculous night. And that was one of the areas that I would go with this orphanage once a week. We did this thing called street ministry, because in that area there are a ton of street kids who are just walking around asking for money. And so we would go and bring like 50 to 100 pre-made fried rice and vegetable whatever meals in a water or something. And we go find these kids, and the group that I would join up with, they do this every week and been doing it for years and are watching these street kids grow up. So they have a deep relationship, and the kids don't speak English. So I'm just there as a human jungle gym basically, and not doing anything, but it's changing my life totally, because you just see pure joy out of these kids, and they can have a moment to forget their responsibilities of begging and getting money to bring back to help the family. And these kids are under 10 years old, But this area of Kuta, what was sad about it is it's basically a row or several rows of these clubs and bars or whatever, but make a general square over several blocks. And you don't really go into it at all. It's more on the outside. And then one night we went with some street kids back to their home and found that their home was behind these bars and clubs, basically, to realize that this whole area that's outlined by clubs and shops and all this stuff is surrounding a huge slum of street kids and their families, who you can see 6-7 people in a family living in a 12 by 12 by whatever square home, with one mattress or whatever. And you can go there, and you shouldn't go to Bali and feel guilty and feel like you have to go do this stuff, but it's sad what the government and what the industry has done to make people not realize what's going on and to kind of forget about this other stuff. But then people in poverty, they're going to help. They know they can get money from all these tourists who are coming in, and so they'll either work for that or just, I don't know. I didn't go down there much to hang out, because it was,
sure,
once you see that, you can't really go and try to have a good time and forget about this other stuff, and you're right next to where all these people are. But Bali also has some of the greatest surf in the world, and these beautiful beaches and places to explore. And to anyone, whether you're on a missional trip or a vacation trip, that is food for the soul.
Yeah,
right there.
This episode is brought to you by the good folks at Upton Bass String Instrument Company. Eric and Gary and the whole Upton team, I can't say enough good things about them. And they have been on board with the various endeavors I've done online from the start. They were one of the early sponsors of the blog back in 2006 and 2007. And it has been so fun to follow along with their journey and see them develop these new models of basses, like the car bass, the Bostonian, the Bohemian, and to connect with all these amazing players. I've had the privilege of speaking with so many people that play Upton basses, from Eric Rivas of Branford Marcellus's band and Lucia Torino of The Devil Makes Three, all the way over to Anthony Monzo of the New Century Chamber Orchestra, and Kevin Smith, Willie Nelson's bass player. I've had many students purchase Upton basses over the years. I've had a lot of colleagues play Upton basses. I see them on gigs all the time. They play great, and Upton stands behind their work. Can't recommend them highly enough. Check them out online at uptonbass.com.
Well, so here you are in the San Francisco Symphony.
Here we go.
One of the world's great jobs,
Totally.
right? You win this job in Santa Barbara. Great job, sets you up very well in the Southern California area, I'm sure. So can you take us on that path from winning that Santa Barbara job into another great job, San Diego Symphony, and now where you are today?
I got Santa Barbara Symphony, and while working with them, I was also in this band, a 3-piece band. This artist, his name's Tim Timmons, and I knew him from the church I was growing up at in Orange County. And he ended up leaving the church and actually signed with Sony, and he's a singer-songwriter and just was writing a bunch of stuff, and then was able to do some shows. And so him, myself, and my friend Bryson played drums, and Tim played guitar and sang, and then I played my upright or electric or a little piano, and we were able to go tour and do great stuff and play occasionally in festivals or larger venues, and it was an incredible experience to be able to play for larger crowds, and I could write my own music, and he was very receptive to that. And so I was getting solo experience playing for people as well as getting an orchestral experience playing with Santa Barbara. And then in 2015, in February 2015, San Diego had an audition. And shortly before that, I actually emailed Jeremy, principal bass. I emailed him if I could play for him to get put on the sub list, which I highly recommend anyone to do if you play bass, or I'm assuming for other stringed instruments it would work. I don't know about the woodwind or brass world as much, but I emailed so many people in Southern California, principals of different orchestras, saying, can I play for you sometime and get put on the sub list potentially, or just play for you? And almost everyone was so receptive and either said, I'll consider putting you on, or I'll put you on, we'll call you sometime. And it took a few years, but I've talked to so many musicians who I guess have never really thought of doing that. And I highly recommend it, because that was one of the greatest ways to build my resume, but also just get experience. So I did that for Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra and with Pacific Symphony, and I played in some other groups around the area, but it definitely helped give me experience and exposure. And then so I did that with San Diego a couple months before their audition and started subbing with them a little bit, which also helped me get acquainted with the hall. And I played for a few of the members too beforehand, which was extremely helpful, and hearing how they want to hear an excerpt. And so, yeah. And then I took that audition, and I did not win it, but I got runner up for the audition. And at that same time, one of their bass players, Greg Burton, he took a sabbatical that year. And so since I was runner up, they gave me his spot, a 1-year contract. And then at the end of that year, he retired. So then they gave me another 2nd-year contract. So yeah, so I was with them for 2 years because I was lucky enough that Greg was retiring at that time. At the end of those 2 years, which was this last summer, 2017. Well, okay, yeah, before this, so this last spring, now a year ago, wow. There were a ton of different openings. LA Phil had an opening, Colorado, Oregon, I think Dallas. Can't remember. There were quite a few auditions. So it was a good time to get ready and look for something. And LA Phil was on, and San Francisco, of course. And LA Phil was on my radar, mostly because I wanted to stay in Southern California, of course. Spoiled me that I am. And I prepped for that I think 4 months beforehand, maybe. I talked with Alex Hanna, actually, because I had met him the year before PMF. He was one of the teachers there. And I talked with him about any suggestions he had on a routine or a schedule and getting ready for an audition. And he was really helpful in sharing a breakdown of, writing out a calendar and writing out your different excerpts and putting them into categories, ones that you can switch off on these categories every day or so. And then certain ones that become, I need to work on this every day. I only have to work on this every other day or whatever. So I followed his routine. I think it was maybe a 15-week setup, which I did. And I felt very prepared, but I felt like I got to a point where I was getting burnt out. I just wanted to take the audition already. And I think I got excited in my prep and I could have done more, maybe fundamentals or foundational things or whatever, but I went straight into excerpts, 15 weeks out. And it was just a matter of time till I was going to get burnt out, I guess. And I took that audition and made it to the semifinals, but that was it. But I was crushed at the end just because I wanted to be in Southern California. But again, trying to remember, all things happen for a reason, and it's going to be great. Just take a deep breath. And so I actually retracted my other applications because I felt bummed and kind of burnt out. And though it were also different enough of lists from LA Phil that and within less than a month to get ready. So I really knew, okay, I'm not actually considering these, I guess. But San Francisco was all the same plus a few more. But again, I was bummed out and I wasn't practicing for about a week or so. And San Francisco was about 6 weeks after LA Phil. I was talking to Jeremy and my good friend Rose Lombardo, who's principal flute in San Diego. I was talking with them and telling them, I think I'm just going to pull all these applications out. And both of them essentially yelled at me with San Francisco to do not, like, you've worked so hard for LA and prep so much, don't ruin this and just assume the worst and not take this opportunity. And so they were the ones that told me to put it in gear and get ready for San Francisco. But they also did that too, I'm sure, because San Francisco this was their third associate principal audition, and I took the other two as well. And I did not get into the finals for those other two, but I had already been working towards it and knew the list. And I mean, I guess it would be wrong just to not do the third audition, maybe. I don't know. I'm just really glad that they forced me to do it. And I mean, I had the greatest resources right there with the symphony to prepare for this by doing mock auditions. I tried to do a mock audition at least within the last 2 weeks, every other day, play for someone, anyone. And I played for the section a lot, played for Jeremy a lot, played for Rose, flute. And one of the best mocks I did was for a violinist and cellist in the orchestra, and they just ripped me apart. And they did not, I guess I hear I play for bass players, and you're going to sound like a bass player. Yeah. It's going to, like, they know what things to look out for, of course, but when you play like a bass player to non-bass players, they definitely have different ears and sometimes aren't as nice, I guess, and don't want to hear just a bass player play. They want to hear context and want to hear music. And so that was rough, but that was huge for me. And just gaining a different perspective, especially in solo rep and chamber rep.
This episode is brought to you by Robertson and Sons Violins. For more than 40 years, over 4 decades, Robertson and Sons has specialized in providing the highest quality stringed instruments and bows to collectors, professional musicians, music educators, and students of all ages. Their modern facility, which is totally beautiful, by the way, if you're ever able to make it out to Albuquerque, New Mexico, I highly recommend it. They have a recital hall that they use not only for performances, but it's available to their clients. So if you want to try out a fine pedigree bass or even a student bass or anything in between, you can go in that recital hall. I've had the chance to do that. Totally amazing. I'm like a kid in the candy store when I'm down there at Robertson's. Check them out online at robertsonsviolins.com. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast.
So, third time auditioning.
Yeah.
But this third time was when you were chatting with Alex about routines and going through that. So do you see? I'm assuming you see that as one of the contributing factors to this work. How did those other two audition experiences? Well, you didn't get out of you didn't make it to the finals the other two times.
Right, correct. Uh-huh.
Yeah. How did you feel walking in there that third time that was maybe different from those first 2 times? Just in terms of your preparation or your mental state, or... Because, I mean, the stakes were kind of high, too, because San Diego was not necessarily going to continue, right?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, so
that's the only reason I was taking auditions, too, is because I had no idea when that contract was going to end. Right. It could go another year, but... who knows what was going to happen.
So the stakes were high.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. I felt real confident, I would say, going into San Francisco because of doing so many mock auditions beforehand and going through the list and having people choose random combinations of excerpts for me and just having all these mock auditions beforehand and getting in that train of thought and routine. And I think also since I had taken the audition 2 times before and knowing what the hall looked like and sounded like, and I could do mental practice, getting to the parking lot, walking my bass over, entering, signing in, waiting. And so I would go through that routine probably every day of just thinking, imagining how it's going to look and how it's going to happen, and waiting in your room, and then waiting for the knock at some point. It's going to freak you out. Okay, we're ready for you. And, you know, and that mental practice was huge, I thought, because once I got there, I could think, I've done this before and I'm ready for this. There are no surprises. Except they did not have the audition in the hall. They had it in a rehearsal room downstairs. So that was kind of a bummer, but maybe it was less intimidating too, because you didn't feel like you had this huge room you had to fill out all the sound, or fill out with all your sound. But yeah, I don't know. That was kind of funny though. I was so certain on everything that was going to happen, and then that curveball came in.
Did you taper your practice at all as you got closer to the audition? I know everybody's got like a different thing that they do. Some people they're doing mock auditions right up until the day that they walk out on stage. Some people, they sort of chill out for a little bit the last maybe week or so. How did that all work for you?
Right. I did mock auditions probably 2 or 3 weeks before the actual audition. I would do it every other day, play for anyone. My roommate too, who does not know anything about music, but he loved getting a free concert, I guess. So I did that. And then I played, I had work with Santa Barbara Symphony the week before the audition. And so we had a concert in Santa Barbara that ended Sunday. And I was doing mocks for people up there as well during that week. And then we had a concert Sunday, and I had to drive that night up to San Francisco, and then the audition was Monday. I think my last mock was on Saturday, and Sunday was, I can play through some things, but I'm already playing a concert and have to do this drive, and I just don't want to be tired. And also just knowing, okay, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. One day is not going to make a difference. I cannot learn anything extra at this point.
What do you change anything, or did you change anything in terms of like diet and exercise? I know that you run, and obviously you surf. Did you continue staying active all the way up to the audition? Did you do anything special diet wise or caffeine wise? Or these are the sort of questions people are always asking.
No, these are good. I still drank the exorbitant amount of coffee that I always drink. So maybe I especially made sure I wouldn't try to fast from drinking coffee. And diet, I always try to stay on a healthy diet regardless, just because my body will start being upset or getting cramps or anything that'll offset me and not put me in a good, happy mood. Well, I also kind of had this feeling of, I had tried for other auditions really changing up stuff like, oh, I'm going to live this different, more pure life or whatever for this audition, and everything's going to be focused on that. And I end up changing my normal routine of things. And I think that put me in such a different, unfamiliar place, or added stress somehow to me, this greater expectation in a sense where it didn't feel normal. I want things to feel as normal and relaxed and no surprises, I guess, as much as I can. And so I just maintained my same diet. And a huge part of my life is needing to be outside and being active. And I used to go to work out at gyms too, but I'm not a huge gym fan, I guess. So I know I need exercise and activity, but it really is mostly being outside. I think something about that is just so freeing to me and really allows my thoughts and everything I've been dealing with just go away. And I love doing trail running where I'm just really on my own, and I love surfing where you are kind of on your own too. There's other people there, but no one's really talking to each other. Maybe that's what it is. I like just being able to get away from stuff, and I can think through things. I can pray, I can meditate, I can just be silent and allow silence to happen, or take my time and wander off somewhere and on a hike or in a surf and just leave my expectations at home, I guess. So I guess I just made sure especially not to do the things that make me happy. So don't take any excuses. Oh, I won't go out today, or I'm feeling lazy or whatever. So I made sure I would exercise and do these things that I know make me healthy and just be regimented to it, but regimented to my normalcy, I guess, of things.
It's great. Well, so I like to end with some sort of advice question and I think it would be really interesting actually, because you did take that year off, right, or at least part of a year off,
right? And
there's so much pressure to not do that, like you're saying. And I mean, I think I've told former students the same thing: look out, don't take that year off. So if you were talking to somebody, or someone was asking you advice who was in a situation maybe similar to yours where they're feeling burned out, like what would you tell people about the positives of taking a year off and maybe some things to watch out for?
I believe that everybody has, a physical, mental, and a spiritual component to their makeup, and that you are going to spend more attention on one thing, maybe less on another thing. And it takes effort to acknowledge all three of those things and make sure all three of those things are in check. Because I definitely believe if you're just hyper focused on one aspect of life, it's not that you will end up being amazing in that. Maybe you will, but I feel like it would be much easier if all the other things were in check and healthy and up to their full capacity or potential, because all things affect each other. You can't have any isolated component in your life where you're saying this doesn't relate to anything else in my life and it's on its own. It's just not true. Everything is affected by something else in your life. So if family stuff is messed up, it's going to affect your music in some way. For me, I was stressed being in Houston and not doing the stuff that I love doing, outdoorsy activities, and just the stress of workload, all that. And so other parts of my life were suffering, like the need to be outside. And so that's why going away for me was, I get to go back to just being outside, not thinking about anything else, and catch up on all that time, I guess, by being away for 4 months. But also because I made a huge decision to just change the trajectory of where my career was going to go. And so that was huge, and I needed time to think about that and get away. And I just recommend to everyone, whether they're burnout now or going to burn out later and they don't know it or they think it's coming, is just to take a step back, maybe a 30,000 foot view of your life in all areas of your life. And what are you sacrificing to make bass the ultimate thing? We need goals, we need dreams. And so you work towards these things in music, but if you're sacrificing other areas and aspects of your life, it's going to affect that dream, I believe, because everything in your life is interconnected. And so if you're burnout, it's not the end of it at all. That could be, not to get crazy philosophical and stuff, but life and growth happens out of death of things, right? And so not saying your dream needs to die, but maybe this moment of pursuing something needs to be put on pause or put an end to, so that you can see what else is in your life that needs to catch up with where you're, the amount of attention you're putting into bass is. And so for me, when I did that, I went to Bali for 4 months, and then I got all this excitement. I had a renewed energy in me. And that was the only audition I've taken so far where I was smiling and happy and excited. Mm-hmm. So I guess that would be my advice. Make sure everything's in check.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes the answer is not more of the same.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. We got to do round 2 at some point.
Awesome. I love that.
Thanks for chatting.
Yeah, of course.
Daniel, thank you so much for chatting. So exciting what you've done so far in your career. And I love talking about these topics, folks. All these things revolving around not just bass, but life and progress and decisions and that sort of thing. If you followed along with the podcast for any length of time, you may realize sort of the secret of this podcast is it's not really that much about bass at all. We're talking with bass players. Sure, we talk about bass gear and strings and that sort of thing on occasion. But what really interests me is the sort of stuff that Daniel and I were talking about. So I really hope you enjoyed this conversation, whether it's your first time tuning in or your 450th time. Welcome. And if you are not subscribed to the podcast, I would love to have you on this journey with me and with us, with the bass community. It's super easy. You can subscribe at contrabassconversations.com/subscribe, or if you listen to podcasts already, just search in whatever podcast player you use, or download our app, contrabassconversations.com/app. That's available for iOS, Android, Kindle. You can follow along with this episode and everything we've done in the past and are going to do in the future. I'd love to have you on this journey with me. So much fun. I have such a great time doing these conversations, chatting with people like Daniel, and I love doing these in person. Daniel and I got a chance to hang out and talk in person, and there's just nothing like that. So I'm hoping to do more and more of those going forward. If you'd like to reach out, feedback at Contrabass Conversations will put you in touch with me. Let me know if you have any topic ideas. I've got a really cool new show coming up about injury prevention and many other topic thematic, shows in the works that I've got percolating in the back of my mind. But I would love your thoughts, or whether it's something I could do at a bass event. We've got Bass Europe coming up in 2018. We've got all sorts of other opportunities where we all come together, and I have my mics with me, and I'm always thinking of new ways to use this podcasting format. So I'd love to hear from you. Again, feedback at contrabassconversations.com. That's going to do it for today's episode. We have such a great team doing these episodes, putting these episodes together each and every week. It was me for years and years and years, and I'm so glad to have help. I can't even begin to thank these folks. Our audio editors are Michael Cooper and Steve Hinchy. Our audio engineer is Mitch Mooring. And by the way, folks, if you're looking for a double bass, Mitch makes fantastic instruments, mitchmooring.com. Well, put you in touch with him. And thank you to Trevor Jones for publication and promotion. I'm Jason Heath, coming to you from beautiful San Francisco, California, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.